Peace and greeting on all who are watching us live now. Welcome to our webinar. We have a leader from our community, great speaker with us join, Assemblyman Charles Fall. I would like to introduce our speaker. Assembly member Charles Fall represents New York's 61st Assembly District, covering North Shore of Staten Island, where he has resided his whole life. Fall is the first Muslim and African-American Assembly member elected from Staten Island. He comes from a working-class family of 6. His parents immigrated to Staten Island from Guinea, West Africa, and display a commitment to improving the lives of those around them. Fall's legislative priorities revolve around comprehensive strategies to ensure stable and healthier communities. This includes expanding resources for teachers, parents, and students to resolve academic disparities, creating affordable housing options, ensuring individuals and families have sufficient health coverage and access to vital services, improving transportation infrastructure and other long-standing community concerns on the North Shore. I welcome Assembly Member Charles Fall. Thank you for joining with us, brother.
Thank you so much, Brother Burak, for having me on this wonderful program.
We really appreciate and we feel honored with your presence. We are certain you have a lot on your plate, yet you were able to take your time to meet with us, and we appreciate as Turkish Americans and as Muslim Americans. Thank you. Today,
my pleasure. I want to, before I start, I really want to just first thank you for having me. But also, like 2 weeks ago, you guys came to Richmond University Medical Center and dropped off thousands of PPE for our health professionals here in my district to my constituents. And I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for that. That really goes a long way. You know, these people, when they see the community coming out, especially our community, Turkish community coming out to help support their efforts, it really means a lot. And from the bottom of my heart, I just want to say thank you guys for that.
Thank you, Brother Charles. We have distributed millions of PPEs during these crises. We had a lot of many elected officials join, Congresswoman Clark, Congressman Pascal, and other elected officials during these millions of PPE distributions. And we really appreciate our first responders, and they are the one fighting for us, just like soldiers during war. And thank you also for showing your support during these crises to your constituents and to our first responders. I guess I'll kick off with the questions. My first question will be, we as Muslim Americans facing racism in every level of society, such as work, street, and school, what actions can you do for us to reduce racism, xenophobia, and Islamophobia from top to bottom?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. I mean, look, first and foremost, I think with the need to deter systematic and institutional rhetoric and policy that's being implemented on the federal level, that has to get addressed first at the federal level. And this includes any and all Muslim bans that are based on factless information. You know, we got to follow the facts and not just go over political rhetoric. What we've done here at the state level in the 2020-2021 budget, you know, we enacted something called the New York Hate Crime Anti-Terrorism Act, which basically establishes this domestic act of terrorism motivated by hate crime as a new A1 class felony, punishable by up to life in prison without parole. We also introduced legislation that was named after Joseph Newman in memory of the Monty stabbing victim who passed away this past Monday. You know, and this is like one of those situations where, you know, if you are attacking one community, we have to let folks know you're attacking all communities, right? And that's why, for me as an elected official, I'm really quick to condemn any attack, not only toward our Muslim communities, but also to the Jewish community, to the Catholic communities, any communities that's of different race. You know, we have to send the message: you attack one of those communities, you're attacking all those communities, and that's how we stay united as a community. And then another thing we also did too, we included funding for the state police hate crime task force. You know, so by adding more monies into these areas, It basically shows government's priority, and our priority is to tackle the hate and make sure that those haters know that we don't appreciate.
Yeah, that's really great, and we really appreciate you've been part of those important legislations, promoting and signing those legislations. That is really important. Perhaps we see the discrimination or hate crimes directly, either from police or from other people. What about those hidden type of discriminations, like when we apply for an apartment, or when we apply for a job, or when we apply for financing, the mortgage discrimination? In your district, what can you do for us to bring more transparency to these applications or these type of discrimination?
So the first thing is that we need to make sure that our community is not silent when they're facing discrimination. If they feel that something is not right, there's a hotline that they could report on that information to. So that's the first thing, is not staying silent, right? Because now we're in a time where if something wrong is being done in the workplace, people are very quick to speak out against it, right? Or sometimes people are also afraid that if they speak out against it, there's going to be some sort of retribution that takes place, right? And there are a number of protections that we put in place actually a few weeks ago. And I'll give you one, for instance. You had some of the healthcare workers in the beginning of the COVID situation that were complaining or making an argument that they didn't have the appropriate PPE gears, and the hospital leadership says, if you're going to complain to the press, you can lose your job for that. And that's actually wrong, because this is an example of them saying, like, look, we have an issue, but telling me we have an issue, and now you're telling us we can't speak. And we passed a law that basically would prohibit a situation like that from happening again. So basically using that example and making sure that it's people understand that they have the same level of protections when it comes to any type of hate or discrimination when you're looking for an apartment or you're trying to get a job, etc. So it's important that, like, obviously government does its part, but also the people does its part too by making sure they're reporting it and holding those entities liable for the discriminatory act.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. Many of us, especially at workplace, when we complain, we don't know if complaint goes anonymously or it goes with our name, and then we will kind of get fired or get penalized for speaking up. And doing this type of legislation to prevent the getting fired, this is really great and is really important.
Absolutely. And one of the things, so I encourage people, is like, if they're having a situation in the workforce, they don't know how to handle it, they can reach out to my office, and me and my staff, we're happy to help guide them on how they can go about it, because at the end of the day, we're a resource for the community, right? And the community, call our number, 718-442-9932, or email us. We're happy to help guide and share more information on that stuff.
That's great. Thank you for providing these really important resources for the constituents and for community. Perhaps, like, especially during these crises, we see a lot more value for the healthcare and hospital system after getting hit by the virus. What changes do you propose for our healthcare system so all of us have easy access to universal basic healthcare?
Yeah, so one, I think the biggest thing we have to do, like just looking at the federal level, is we have to fight against the policy that's trying to end the Affordable Health Act. We have to remember one thing, any policy that's introduced or proposed is not perfect. It won't be perfect. There's always going to be amendments to it, right? So the idea, the intent of the Affordable Care Act, I think, was well intended, right? Are there issues with it? Yes, there are issues with it. And I think as a community, instead of reinventing the wheel, we got to focus on improving it and adjusting it, because at the end of the day, there is a healthcare crisis throughout our country, and I think it's been further highlighted during this COVID situation. And I think what we did with the Affordable Care Act was a step in the right direction, or what the Obama administration did with the Affordable Act was a step in the right direction. But again, there are definitely improvements that need to be made. And so, I'll give you an example. Like in our first year, my first year as representative in the 61st, we passed in the state budget, which basically codifies the Affordable Care Act provisions, which includes the state health insurance marketplace into state law. And that's obviously, again, it's not. It's a step in the right direction. There's still more work to do. I'll never sit here and say, "Hey, we passed this bill. It's over. We're good." We still got a lot more work to do, man. And so, but again, we're heading in the right direction, and we have to remember when we pass these bills, it takes 3 branches of government to sign off on it before it becomes law, right? So in the state Senate has to go through the committees. They have to vote on it. It has to pass the House. It goes to the Assembly. The Assembly goes to the committees. They vote on it. It passes it, and then the governor has to sign it, or he vetoes it. So it's like it's a process, but it's also important for the community to be aware that of that process, and sometimes why doesn't things don't happen like that in government.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of work, and we really appreciate the effort and hard work you're putting for us. And it is not easy to change the entire really intricate, complicated health system in a quick time. What do you think? The NYPD budget is $6 billion. It's been going on the social media, like NYPD has $6 billion. It's more than the money that we spend on healthcare and social youth development. And now a lot of protests, we need to defund the NYPD. What do you think, and how will the defunding police look like?
So when I hear defunding the police department, I hear the translation for me is, we shouldn't have a police department. And if that's what it is, then that is like, I don't think that's even reasonable. Because you have to remember one thing: New York City is the #1 target. Look what happened during 9/11. Look what happened with the individual that ran over those people on the West Side Highway. We're constantly a target. And I have 2 girls, and many of us have kids here. And to live in a city where we don't have the adequate protection, I don't think it's reasonable. We got to make sure that when we leave this world, we leave it in a place that's safe for our kids. In terms of saying, we want to shift some of the function of the police departments, maybe that's something we should definitely take a look at. And whether it's trying to see how we could take some of the capital dollars and putting it into some of youth employment, or taking a look at one of the units within the police department that's been problematic over the years that needs to be changed, or maybe disbanding it. I don't know, right? But there needs to be, I think, input from everybody at the table here, right? From the community, from those in law enforcement. And we have to remember one thing, right? We have been in a position, or I've seen so many times where, when these types of things come up, there's only one group of people at the table, right? And if there's only one group of people at the table, that means the policy could be far one way, right? And we can't have that, right? If you have a radical on both sides that are it's not gonna it's not gonna come to like a good understanding on how things should be, right? So if everybody's at the table, of course there's gonna be disagreements, but for government's part here, it's important for us to take all sides into account before making a decision. I understand that emotions are high right now, and things could get intense, but we were elected to not make tough decisions. Or we're elected to make tough decisions. I should say that.
Yeah.
And so so it just gets concerning when I hear of the fund, because it just seems like you want to completely abolish law enforcement. But we have to remember that we do need protection in our community, and also we got to say that those that do bad in law enforcement need to be held accountable. That's the biggest thing. We need to build trust. And so you got to remember that not and I always use this example. I remember after 9/11, there was this picture of the Muslim community that all Muslims are terrorists, and that's not the case. That was very false. Those people that did that it's not a reflection of Islam, right? That's not who we are, right? Just like the same thing with the bad cops. Those bad cops are not a reflection of the department as a whole, right? But because of that perception, that issue, that's why people see it that way, But we have to always put that in perspective. That I hope that makes sense, but like that's
yeah, I think that makes sense. We just have few bad apples, and we think all the apples are bad. And as human nature, when we see like few people are doing bad things, and we think, oh, everyone is doing like all those bad things, all the cops are bad, but that's not the case. I think it needs to be data-driven decision, and along with the crime rate, if the crime rate will go higher, then definitely we cannot defund the police, and we might even want to fund it more. I guess that will depend on the crime rate and some data analysis and data-driven decision.
And look, I agree, right? But like, I feel like the data is one component, right? And it's like a pizza pie, right? And the data component is one piece of the pie. The community input is one piece of the pie. Where the law enforcement agency stands for is one piece of the pie. You know, like all that stuff, like really has to be taken into account on making these decisions. But I hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, I agree. In the light of COVID-19 and its devastating effect on working class people and communities, how does this relate to structural systematic racism? Like, you live in a certain zip code area, and that kind of determines your lifespan or likelihood of getting some type of disease or the other resources. How does this relate to structural systematic racism?
One, I think just the COVID situation only further highlighted how big the inequalities were in communities of color. Period. End of sentence. I think it just highlighted it tremendously. And so, you know, we and I'll give you an example. Like, I have a city MD in my district that's an urgent care center. Well, you know, if you have an urgent care center in your community, that means it's urgently needed in your community. So the fact that they would even close down during the pandemic was outrageous, ridiculous, and unacceptable. And so, unfortunately, they had to be shamed to reopening. And they did reopen. And as a result of that, I introduced legislation to make sure something like that does not happen again, that they would have to get approval by the state before they shut down for whatever reason or close down for whatever reason, especially during a pandemic when people are relying on urgent care, right? That blows my mind, I'm sorry. So I was also getting like a lot of emails from people that needed to go on unemployment, they couldn't pay their rent, which is why, you know, we traveled back to Albany to pass the Emergency Rent Relief Act of 2020, which basically establishes an interim residential rent relief program for low-income tenants, and it also prohibits eviction for non-payment of rent for residential tenants who have suffered financial hardship. You know, so you know, for more information on that, again, come reach out to my office. I'm happy to get you more information on that. Another thing that we also did during this period was, you know, passing legislation that would require the Department of Health to conduct a study on the health impacts of COVID on minorities in New York State. And this basically builds on the recent joint legislative hearing that was held on the disproportionate impacts of COVID on minority communities. And some of you may already know too that, you know, we passed a bill that would prohibit a utility corporation or municipality from terminating or disconnecting services to any residential customer for the non-payment of an overdue charge during the COVID crisis or a state of an emergency. And the last thing I'll just highlight is what we did with the banking institutions. We basically granted 180 days of mortgage forbearance with the option for an additional 180 days on a residential mortgage on a primary residence. So any mortgager can demonstrate financial hardship as a result of a pandemic.
Yeah, these are really great resources, and I think we all need to utilize and communicate more with your office to utilize these resources, and that is really helpful. Are you satisfied with what the different bodies of city government have been doing, or what more can be done to combat structural racism in our city?
I think, you know, we all know that more needs to be done to address racial justice. We got to collaborate as one unifying force. We're one community. We're one ummah, right? We got to keep remembering that.
That's right.
And in order for change to come, you know, people have to, you know, obviously be united, but also be ready to condemn and also speak out against the wrong. You know, for me, look, in my position as an elected official, you know, I have a duty and a responsibility to speak out against things that are wrong, and also to speak in support of things that are right. And if that means that, you know, I'm not going to get reelected because of you know, what I thought was the moral right thing to do, then I guess I won't get reelected. I always say that politics is not bigger than life. Life is bigger than politics, you know. And you know, this is all short, you know. So I feel very strongly about that stuff. And you know, and I know one of the things too we've done, you know, at the state level to help improve transparency, where we can help address some of the racial injustice. You know, the STAT Act was passed, which basically required the Office of Court Administration and Division of Criminal Justice Service to keep detailed records from local law enforcement and courts on a number of things that includes arrest-related deaths in each county, race, ethnicity, age, and sex of each individual, the zip code and location where death occurred, and a brief description of circumstances surrounding each death, you know. And, you know, state police officers are now required to wear cameras. And when a person is in custody, you know, they there's now law that they have to receive prompt and reasonable medical and mental health assistance. You know, and so lastly, you know, I know how it feels like being a black man getting called on 911 for no reason. So you pass the bill, also known as Karen's Law. Poor Karen. Legislation. When I say poor Karen, I'm just like, you know, you go into that park that day, and I don't think you go there with the, you know, you just always got to be careful with everything that you do, and what she did was wrong and unacceptable. So as a result of that, we passed legislation that when a person calls 911 or summonses the police for alleging criminal activity, you know, they basically, you know, you can't call 911 saying, hey, there's a black man outside of my door, I think he's trying to rob me. You know, like, because you said that the person's race, that's what's the issue there. But if it's a person generally, okay, we're one, right? That's it. You know?
Yeah.
So
this is really important. You're contributing and signing all these legislation and supporting our communities. We really appreciate it. And all the Muslim Americans and Turkish Americans like see all the hard work you've been doing. And personally, me and my friends, everyone knows you and they talk about you, and all the supports, hard work you've been doing. We really appreciate it. It does not go unnoticed, and especially within the Turkish American communities, really appreciate it. And
I appreciate
yeah, thank you really for joining. And I know you have a lot to do, especially during these difficult times. And I asked for your 30 minutes and you did. And now our time is 3:30. Really appreciate. And we feel honored with your presence and all the hard work you've been doing for us.
Thank you so much for those kind words. I'm honored to be on your show. Special thank you again for, you know, everything you did and your team did to give out the PPEs to our hospitals, and not only the PPEs, but everything you do in the community outside of COVID. You know, this is COVID was just highlighting more of what you already do. You know, so thank you, and thank you for having me. And always happy to help anytime I can be helpful. God bless.
Thank you, brother, and peace and God bless to you and to your staff. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Take care, guys.
Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.